The thoughts, views, and comments expressed by Sidebar, its guests, callers, and advisors are not necessarily those of the management, ownership, or production unit of ILS Verizon Media Group. Sidebar, a 103.5 The Beat podcast, is a production of ILTV Studios and may not be reproduced or represented, in part or in its entirety, without the express written consent of Verizon Media Group. Sidebar is the intellectual property of Verizon Media Group. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved.
Welcome to Sidebar 103 The Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. Today, we were going to talk about education, but I felt like there was something before we could get to that may be of more, not maybe, it is of more importance. I can say that with all the confidence in the world, knowing what the topic is that I want to talk with you about. But before we get to the actual point and the topic, you know how this works. I got to give you the little lead up. And the lead up involves the story of Jonah. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the story of Jonah, but for those of you who may not be familiar with the story of Jonah, Jonah is a minor prophet in the Bible. It's a very short book in the Bible, like 4 chapters. And some scholars are of the belief that the story of Jonah is more of a parable than a historic event. Regardless, that would actually make it more important, because that means whoever wrote the book of Jonah had a specific message that they wanted us to have. And I don't know if people necessarily take that message away. When you look at the story of Jonah, a prophet is told to go to the city of Nineveh, which is the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and to tell them, because of their wickedness, God is going to destroy them and going to crush them. And he doesn't want to do that because the Assyrians are such horrible people. They're terrible, terrible people. And he's like, God, why would I? And so he actually gets on a boat and literally heads in the opposite direction away from Assyria. God sends a storm. The people on the boat are like, why is this storm attacking us? And so they all start praying to their gods. Nothing happens. They cast lots. And basically casting lots is their way of saying, okay, we're going to draw straws. Whoever gets the shortest straw, it's clearly their fault. And Jonah draws it. And it's like, what did you do that made this happen? And Jonah says, well, I was told to go to this place with these evil people and tell them that their end is nigh, and I really don't want to do it, because if I do it, I hate them so much. I want them to just be destroyed. If I tell them to repent, they might repent, and then what? All right? And so people were like, okay, what do you want us to do? Well, how can we make the storm stop? Because we're all going to die. And Jonah's like, well, if you throw me overboard, because the storm isn't really after you, it's after me. Throw me overboard, everything will be fine. And this is the part of the story that most people remember, that Jonah was thrown overboard. He was swallowed by a great fish, which one of those things, even as I'm telling you it, I realized that I fought the urge to say whale. And while on a technicality, it could not be a whale that swallowed Jonah, there's no real definition for the word fish, right? So we say fish, and we mean all sorts of animals, all right, that are barely related to each other. Because, first of all, a shark is a fish, but a shark doesn't have scales. A shark doesn't have bones. It has cartilage. But like, oh, it's a fish because it has gills. But I mean, humans have gills in the womb. So like, what even is a fish, right? But whales, at least the whales that we know, cannot swallow, or they don't swallow large animals. What they tend to do is they only swallow like krill and stuff. And so we know it wasn't a whale, assuming that this is a historic event. It's some giant fish. But for those people who are very pedantic and say, oh, it wasn't a whale, it was a fish. Okay, whatever. A whale is a mammal, and so is a dolphin. And what is a shark? A shark is like a dinosaur. But that's neither here nor there. This is the part of the story that most people know about Jonah. Jonah was swallowed by a great fish, and then he was in the belly of the fish for 3 days, and then he prayed to God, and the fish vomited him up onto the shore. And that's usually where they stop the story when they're telling little kids it. But that's the thing. That's not the story of the prophet Jonah. You're literally stopping the story in the middle. Why was he swallowed by the fish? Because he was thrown overboard. Why is he thrown overboard? Because there was a storm. Why was there a storm? Because he went on this boat when he was supposed to be going to Nineveh. He was going to Tarshish, which is modern day Spain. It's in the opposite direction. So it's like he was supposed to be going to essentially Iraq, and he was going to Spain, which are different parts of the globe, if you remember correctly, right? And so what then happened? Jonah is in Nineveh. He tells the people, hey, yo, God looking at what y'all doing. You wicked, evil people. You all deserve to die, and God is going to wipe you out. And the people are like, you know what? We are bad. We have been doing horrible things, and the people repent, and God doesn't destroy them, right? And you know what happens? How the story of Jonah ends, what the 4th chapter is about? Jonah is outside of the city, waiting for this fire and brimstone to descend upon the city and destroy everybody. But nothing happens. And Jonah is upset. And he says, I knew you were going to do this, God. I knew that you were going to forgive them. These evil dogs who are horrible people that never served you. You warned them, you said, change and repent from your ways, and they did. And suddenly, everything is forgiven, and now look at them. And so, there's also this part of the story where Jonah is in the hot sun. He's being miserable Jonah. And the Lord lets this plant grow up next to him. And it shades him. And so he's protected from the hot blazing sun. And I mean, if you've been outside recently and had to walk in the sun, you know what it's like when suddenly you get underneath a tree. It's like, oh, this is so refreshing. So Jonah has this moment where it is so refreshing, and he's like, oh, thank you. This is so cool. And then a worm comes and eats the tree and destroys it overnight. And Jonah cries, and he is so sad for it. And the book of Jonah ends with saying, you are sad about the death of this tree, about this little vine that was giving you some shade. But you didn't care about the city full of people, because in your mind, they are so evil, they deserve to die. You care more about the death of this tree than you care about human beings. Because that's what the story is actually about. Now, I bring that up, not because I'm like, oh, don't hate this person. I have no specific person in mind. But I do think there is something for us to take away from it, because when we think about evil, when we think about people who are evil or what we consider evil, there's a line that we draw. And I think that the story of Jonah is applicable to us to this day. So that's what I want to talk with you about today. And we're going to do that when we come back from this break. You are listening to Sidebar, 103 podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We'll be right back.
This year marks a milestone. The OWN Foundation is celebrating 10 years of impact, innovation, and inspiration. Join us for OWN Talks, September 12th at the Atlantis Resort, Paradise Island at 7 p.m. for a transformative experience under the theme, Activate. Taking the stage are world-renowned leaders and visionaries. Sebastian Bastien, visionary entrepreneur, philanthropist, and CEO of Island Luck and Weiss Technology Group. Barbara Corcoran, legendary real estate mogul, entrepreneur, investor, and star of Shark Tank. Vusi Tembekwayo, global business strategist, venture capitalist, and one of Africa's most influential thought leaders. Be part of this unforgettable evening as the OWN Foundation celebrates a decade of purpose and progress. And together, we activate the future.
Welcome back to Sidebar, 103 to Be podcast, powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. Today, I was going to say we're talking about Jonah, but we're not talking about Jonah. We're actually talking about evil and the evil people and the concept of evil. Now, I have some notes here, so I may refer to my notes from time to time. But when I was a kid, and even up until very, very recently, the one thing in the world that everybody knew was evil was Nazis. Everybody considered Nazis to be the most evil, despicable group of people on the planet. It was so, like, Nazis, if you made a movie where you had somebody who was Nazi, you didn't have to explain what they were, their background, if they had a family or anything. You could kill them with impunity. And it was fine because they were so evil. And while I do understand the reason for that narrative, I fear that we now live in a world where that has come back around full circle to affect us, right? Because if you don't explain why you're doing something and you're just doing it, then people are forced to make up their own minds about a thing. Let's say, we say, okay, Nazis are this horrible, evil group of people. Cool, and you got to go with me on this journey. It's going to take us a while to get there. Nazis are a horrible group of people. They're evil. They're the scum of the earth. They're so bad that they're almost not even human. To be a Nazi is to not be human. And there's a level of irony because the reason why we consider Nazis to be horrible people is because they were able to convince our entire country of people that different groups of people, Jews, Romani, that people call gypsies, Jehovah's Witness, people who are mentally disabled, people who were slightly physically handicapped, people who were old. They had a long list of people who they were like, these people aren't really people, or they're not equal type of people because they can't contribute, or we think that they're evil, or they're not really human. And so now we look at Nazis in that same regard, not without cause. I mean, they're clearly World War II, right? So there's a reason for us to think that. But the thing is, when you think about it blindly like that, this is where the problem comes in. Because the Nazi was evil, and they did evil things, and now they become not human. But in the same breath, recently, I've seen more than once people reacting online to an AI voiceover of Hitler explaining, well, the AI is translating Hitler from German to English. And Hitler is saying these things, and people are like, oh, were we on the wrong side? Were the Nazis, did they know something that we didn't know? And it's because in the AI version of Adolf Hitler, he's saying things like, oh, we must fight for the Christian right, and we must fight to make the nation pure and Christian and this, and he's saying key words. And the reason why it is dangerous to look at somebody as just pure evil and not as a human being is because that's how the Nazis got the Germans to start killing millions of people. You say the key phrases. You say, what is it that you like? Well, these other people who are different from you and me, they want to take that away from you. But you don't see yourself as evil. You see Nazis as evil. But using the same argument that Nazis use, you start to see other people as evil. And you don't realize that all of us have the capacity to become as evil as we suspect or we believe or we think Nazis are. We can very easily fall into that trap because that's how the German people did. This is the thing about evil. The nature of evil is that evil people rarely think that they're evil. Evil people tend to think, you might think of me as evil, but I am doing the right thing. I'm righteous. Righteous people tend to think of themselves as evil and saying, okay, I have a flaw here and there. What I'm doing is not the best thing, or I don't always make the best decision. So you remember a couple weeks ago, I was like, do we need insults? What's the point of insults, right? Evil feels the same way, where it's like, what is the point of labeling something as evil? We say this is evil so that people stay away from it. But if you don't understand what makes something evil, if you just say this thing is evil and that's it, you leave it alone, and you also point out that this thing is evil and therefore I am different and better than it, the danger is you don't see when you are evil yourself, when you're doing evil things, when you are participating in evil actions, or when you're ignoring evil actions. You just blindly saying, hey, I'm not evil because I'm not that thing. I'm not that specific thing over there. I'm not a Nazi. I'm not a person who drops a bomb on people. I'm not a terrorist, right? I'm not a terrorist. I'm not a Nazi. I'm trying to think of other things that people think of as blindly as evil, right? But once you label it, and this isn't to say that evil doesn't exist, but I don't think it exists in the way that we think of it. If we make it that evil is this specific thing that only certain people who are born evil, they're born monsters. Because even with the thought experiment of, if you could kill Hitler as a baby, would you kill Hitler as a baby? That assumes that Hitler was born evil. But Hitler wasn't necessarily born evil. He was born in a weird position. He's weird, like this little boy in Austria. Nobody knows who his real father is. He was so poor that He had to wear clothes from the Jewish guy who owned the apartments that he lived in. He went off to art school. And looking at his artwork, it wasn't half bad, but the people back then are like, this is garbage. And they spit on the ground and like, get out of here. You're a failure in art school. Joins the army, loses horribly, and he then decides that all of this is the fault of the Jews. And he becomes very anti-Semitic. Now, Hitler didn't become anti-Semitic in a vacuum. How many of us have failed at things in life? How many of us have had a hard time at life? Tons of us. This is going to be a very difficult thing to say, and maybe an even more difficult thing to accept. It is important for us to see ourselves when we look at evil people like Hitler, because that is the only way to stop ourselves from becoming Hitler. If you don't see, okay, I've had a horrible run of things, but let me not blame this group of people that all of society already hates as the reason for my problems. You could very easily become the evil, this supreme evil that we consider or considered Hitler. If you are not able to look and say, hey, life is hard and complicated. My actions have meaning and they have an effect on people. I should not just use my power to serve only myself and only serve my inner circle and move only myself along, because then that's how you become evil. All of us have within us this capacity to not only do evil things, but to become this evil person. But we don't see it as that. We see it as evil is this innate thing that everybody will do. And that good people are born good. Mother Teresa is this wonderful person. And then you read her diaries after she's died, and it's like, oh, this woman struggled with all sorts of things. She's not necessarily the wholesome saint that we built up in our head, because people aren't inherently good or bad. People are inherently people. If you are so easy and quick to label something as evil, it gives you that distance to say, that's not me. But the problem is, under certain circumstances, it is you. This is exactly who you can be. This is exactly who you might be already, and you're becoming, and you're fine with it. And to go back to the AI Hitler thing, you have people, the Nazi propaganda has not even changed. It's the literal same propaganda that people fell for. And I remember maybe 5 years ago, if even all of that, people would ask and ponder the question, how could an entire group of people, how could an entire country just stand by and let this evil overwhelm them, convince them to do these things? The trials of Nuremberg, where after the Germans lost the Second World War and they captured all the Nazis who were still alive, the high-ranking ones, they put them on trial, and they say, well, why did you do it? I was just following orders. I was just following orders. And how did it become so normal for you to do these horrific things? That they were not just working people to death and making them dig their own graves and then shoot them in the back of the head and then leaving them in these massive graves. They were pulling the gold fillings out of their teeth. They were gassing people. They were looking for new ways of how to kill and exterminate an entire ethnic group of people. They were experimenting on twins and children and old people and saying, okay, what else can we do? Can we render the fat down, or can we make lamps out of their skin? What can we do? And they were doing these horrific evil things, but in their mind, they weren't evil. They were doing what they were told. They were doing what they thought was best for their country. And it wasn't until the collapse of everything and the collapse of their nation that they realized this was horrible. When they got to step back, and once again, there not that this, I'm using generalizations, but in all of these type of situations, there's always people who are like, this is weird, this is wrong, I want no part to do with this, secretly sneaking, because you have both in the Holocaust, you have like Schindler's List, where this guy, in order to save a couple of Jewish persons, he pretends that they work for him, and so that they could, not be killed, because he's seeing the horrors of what's happening to them. The same thing happened in Rwanda, right? Whereas, like, in order to prevent this horrible genocide, this guy pretends like, oh no, these guys work for me. They're like, I got them, and he risks his life. So there's always those people. But the average person didn't see themselves as evil. And the thing is, it was only the very, very high up Nazis that got killed, that got executed, that suffered any repercussions for their crimes against humanity, against all of these various groups of people that they killed and they decimated and they robbed and they did just horrible, horrible, horrible things to. The middle management Nazis, they went back to work. The average person who was a part of the Nazi Party, because of course, at that point, the Nazi Party is so big, it's almost impossible as a German of any sort of standing to not be a part of the Nazi Party in some way, shape, or form. But they also went back to work. Like, everybody just went. There's tons of people who are direct descendants of people who were a part of the Nazi Party that are alive today, because that's just how life was. But suddenly, after the war, none of them are evil. Their grandparents are born innately with that. No. And in the Bahamas, I mean, we are far enough removed from World War II and Nazi, because even though we had soldiers that did things in the Second World War, I don't think that any of the Bahamian soldiers saw active combat. Slavery is wrong. Slavery is evil. Were the people who held slaves and who were born into a slave-holding family, were they born evil? One could argue yes. But they also thought that this was normal. The ones that did horrific, horrible things to slaves, right? Like the poor Black Kate and the people who probably killed Pompey, right? Their descendants. Do you think, like, if they were born evil, that their descendants didn't inherit that evil? Or is it that it's much more complicated, that the idea of evil cannot and is not as simple as some people are just born bad? There's a lot that goes into it, right? There's individual personal choice. There's free will. There's also the environment that you're born into. If you're born in one part of the world, you're going to speak Spanish. If you're born in another part of the world, you're going to speak English or some variant of English. That doesn't mean that you hate all other languages. It means that that's where you were born. And those things also have the impact on our lives. And so when we think about evil, and of course, it's 2025, I don't think that people regard Nazis as evil as they did 5 years ago. Betwixt me and you, I think they should. But that's a whole different topic. People who choose to be Nazis in this day and age, they've chosen to be evil. But that's how I feel about the situation. I just feel like I should say that. But there are other things that all of us consider evil. And the problem isn't that we've all acknowledged that that thing is bad, or that thing may be bad, or that thing may be undesirable. The problem is, once we say that, we draw this very hard line between us and that thing, and we don't see where we are also doing the same thing, where we have some of those attributes. We're going to take a quick break. This is Sidebar, 103 to Be podcast, powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Paradise Premium Foods, where exceptional taste meets everyday convenience. Right in the heart of Hurricane Hole Plaza, whether you're planning a beachside brunch, an intimate dinner, or simply restocking your favorites, we offer only the finest selection of local and imported goods, handpicked for quality, freshness, and flavor. At Paradise Premium Foods, shopping is effortless, service is personal, and every visit feels like a treat. From gourmet meals to go to organic essentials and indulgent treats, this is your neighborhood market elevated. Live well, eat better. Discover Paradise Premium Foods, now open at Hurricane Hole Plaza, Paradise Island. Paradise Premium Foods. Taste the difference.
Edenwell has expanded their testing menu. We now offer blood work, drug screening, and so much more. Our hours of operation are Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., located on 11 Madera Street. We are here for all of your laboratory needs, with fast and reliable lab work done by our friendly and knowledgeable staff. Let us help you take the needed steps to stay in the know about your health. Let's keep working towards a healthier you. Stay Eden well.
Sidebar 103 to Be podcast, powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna, and today we are talking about evil. We started off talking about Jonah. So assuming that Jonah is a parable, and the parable is saying, here's a story about a prophet that God sends to do something, addressing people who are quote unquote evil. Jonah doesn't want to do that. Jonah thinks these people should die. Jonah has no desire for these people to repent, to change their ways, to be reintegrated into society. Well, they won't be reintegrated into society because it's the Assyrian Empire. They have their own society. But Jonah is done with them. He hopes nothing but the worst for them. And storm comes, swallowed up by a fish. La la, you know the story. He does it eventually. In that story of Jonah, when you hear it, who do you think you are? Who do you think the writer wants you to associate with? Who do you think they want you to be like, oh, that's what I'm doing. This is what it is. You're not the Ninevites, you're not the Assyrians, you're not the people who are evil, because they are, in story writing, you call it, they are the kind of, they're the inciting incident kind of. They're like they're the reason why that you're doing something, but they're not the main character, because they're in the story, but they're barely there. They're really only in the story to progress the story. The story is about Jonah. It's not about the fish. It's not about the plant at the end of the story. It's about Jonah and his desire to say, these people are evil. They've done evil things. And I've heard, you get the propaganda of like how evil the Assyrian Empire would have been. I keep saying Assyrian Empire, but I hope to God that's correct. But anyway, you hear about how evil they were, the vicious, violent things they would do. Doesn't matter. God's like, hey, tell him to go repent. And Jonah doesn't want to do that. So if you had to pick a character in the story, who do you think you are? You're supposed to read this story and see yourself in Jonah. You're supposed to say, I see myself as this righteous person who's still not doing the right thing, but I'm better than this group of people that I know to be evil. But if they're evil and they need to repent, that implies that they're not listening to God. But Jonah is in direct defiance of what God's saying. The people in Nineveh, as far as we know, they don't even know God exists. They're not this God. They worship a different God, right? So they're not having this conversation with God to say, oh, we need to change our ways because X, Y, and Z, because you told us to. God speaks to Jonah, and Jonah says, cool, boss, and literally heads in the opposite direction. Jonah's not listening and not doing the will of God, just like the people of Nineveh. He has the same issue that they have, albeit on a different level, but he also has the same issue, but he doesn't see it because he's not them. He's not from Nineveh. He's not an Assyrian. He's not, he's a different guy. I'm from probably Judah, right? I'm a prophet of the Lord. I don't got to do that. I'm a righteous man. But he was willing. Now think about this. Think about this most horrible thing that the people in Nineveh could have been doing. Whether it was child sacrifice, whether it was some sort of sexual immorality, whether it was killing people indiscriminately, whether it was some sort of like weird, craven, violent thing. Whatever it is, Jonah wanted the Lord to destroy their city, to raze it to the ground, to just blow it up. So if they were killing babies, it didn't matter because Jonah wanted to kill the men, the women, the babies. He went full Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. Not just the men, but the women and the children. He wanted to kill everybody. But he didn't see himself as evil. And this is what he is condemned for in the final chapter. And that's it. It literally ends there because that's the point of the book. It doesn't go on and say, and then Jonah repented. It's like, you were more concerned about this tree, this little plant that gave you shade for a day, than for the souls of all these people in this city. Because you don't care about them, because they're not you, and you've separated yourself from them so far that you have the opportunity to repent. The storm came, but it didn't kill you. You're thrown overboard, but you didn't die. A fish swallowed you. The fish didn't digest you. You were in the fish for 3 days, and then you were vomited up, and you were given a chance to do the right thing, but you don't want to give that chance to anybody else because you don't see the same thing in them. I'm not suggesting that the people of Nineveh weren't evil. They probably were. They probably were horribly evil. But that's not the point. The point is, by labeling them evil, and only them, and making it seem like that's just who they are, Jonah misses the evil in his own heart in wanting all of them to die. Because just like in Germany, I imagine there must have been somebody in that town who wasn't a horrible person, who wasn't an evil person, but you wouldn't mind just blowing the whole thing up. When we aren't able to make that step of one seeing where it is possible for us to fall for the same evil that we condemn. You see somebody get murdered and gunned down in the street, and you say, these people evil and wicked, they killing people, children. When you can't look and say, there have been times when I was driving in my car and somebody cut me off in traffic and I wanted to kill them. And the only reason I didn't kill them because my car transmission don't work, and so I couldn't speed up to run them off the road. If you can't make that connection, that it is but by the grace of God that you have not been in that position, where you have never been both that angry and in possession of a weapon, or that you've been so desperate that you would kill somebody for money. Like we do these thought experiments. How much money do they pay? How much money would it take for you to slap your sister? But slap my sister for free. How much money it take to slap you with me? Somebody said, yeah, $5,000, you slap him with me? No, babe, like 50,000, babe. We're doing the thought experiments of the evil things. And it's just a matter of arithmetic and numbers to say, we are just not that desperate to go and gun somebody down the street. We're not that desperate to go sell drugs. And then if we were to find ourselves in that position, that desperate to sell the drugs, we wouldn't see it as evil. We'd see it as a moment of desperation. And while you're selling drugs, it's dangerous because you got drug competition. Other persons are selling drugs. And so they're like, oh, you on my block, or you trying to move drugs through my territory, and they shooting at you, so you shooting at them, and now somebody dead. Or you trying to steal drugs from them, and they trying to steal drugs from you, and now somebody dead. And you don't see where it is not only possible, where this could happen to you, where you could be in that situation. You don't have that empathy in your heart because you've already decided. Them people evil. Them people wicked. That's why them people doing what they doing. Then you're failing. And how hot does the sun have to be beating on your head before you realize that the way that we change the country, the nation, the world around is that we have to be able to see ourselves in the worst person and then want to help ourselves in that situation. And I'm not suggesting that you go out tomorrow and like high five every drug dealer you see, right? But if you do not see yourself in the person that you consider evil, then there is no redemption for them because they're not a real person. Because let's be honest, for most of us, the only real person that we know is ourselves. We are real. I'm a real person. You consider yourself a real person. But when you look in the newspapers and when you watch the news, somebody gets shot. That's number 64. That's number 78. Sometimes we don't even know the name of the person who got murdered because the news don't even come back and report when they find out the person's name. There are people who have been murdered in this country, and the only time the news calls their name is when the court case comes up 5 or 6 years later. And sometimes it's because somebody else get murdered. So Jamal killed this person. 2 years later, Jamal got killed, but he was on trial for killing this person. That's the first time they mentioned that the first person's name was Paul. That happens all the time. We don't see them as people. We see them as numbers. We see them as those people over there. And we might not say the word evil, but that's how we feel in our heart, that they have done something to deserve their lot in life and the position that they're in. And while there is free will involved to some extent, there are different things at play that make it so that you are making the decisions that you're making. If I only have access to a bicycle, my decision is never going to be about how much gas am I going to buy. I only got a bike. That's not a decision I have to make. And so the circumstances that you find yourself in help to shape and mold these things. And if I can't see myself as the person on the bicycle, then I don't feel any empathy for them when they ride in the rain and they trying to not get knocked down, or they're on the sidewalk and I'm like, oh, these people are always doing foolishness. And I see them as evil, even though I don't use the word evil. And that's the problem. All of us, at some point in our life, are Jonah. We are the main character. We have the ability to make an impact on this person's life, to point them in the right direction. And here's the thing. God never said to Jonah, if you tell these people this, I will forgive them. Jonah just had it in the back of his head that it might be a way out for them. And he didn't want that. People do evil things. And if somebody chooses to make evil their profession, if they choose, after you say, hey man, you don't have to murder, you don't have to rob, you don't have to steal, and the person is making that their all right? You've done your part in trying to help them out of that direction. And I know that sounds like I'm giving you an out. I don't mean like from a distance, you grumble in your bedroom, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. No. Like you've actually contributed to society in some way, shape, or form in helping to make the world a better place so that people have options. If a person makes the wrong decision, then fine. But if you are, let's say, a business owner, and you already only hiring people who are economically depressed because you refuse to pay people anything more than minimum wage because, once again, you think that minimum wage is some sort of standard, but really what it is a protective measure by the government to prevent you from making people literal slaves. You're paying them basic. And so now they got to work 2 and 3 jobs. So they don't have no time to stay at home with their children. And their children wander out in the street and hang out with the wrong crowd and get caught up in the wrong thing. And boom, the child either dead or end up in jail or doing something. All right? You are the one who's not doing the right thing. You can easily do better by paying people a fair wage. That's going to help society greatly, more than my words ever can, more than your words ever can. If you pay people a living wage, that could help to stop future generations from making poor decisions. All right? I know that that's just an example. But unless you're doing things like that, right, then what are you really doing? You're just being Jonah, heading away from Nineveh. You've got to go into Nineveh, whatever places is that you hate and those people that you despise, and you're like, those people. But if you were headed to Tarshish instead of Nineveh, and now you're wondering why there's a giant storm headed your way, why all the people on the boat, all us on this boat together, why the people turning against you, why they saying, well, what we could do with you, and you know the answers to throw you overboard, this is the direction that you've gone in. Because in this situation, you are Jonah. Anyway, it's getting late. And I've definitely gone over time. So, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to talking to you again next week. I'll be inside where it's slightly better lit than it is right now. But you've been watching and listening to Sidebar 103 to B podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. True God still.
This year marks a milestone. The OWN Foundation is celebrating 10 years of impact, innovation, and inspiration. Join us for OWN Talks, September 12th at the Atlantis Resort, Paradise Island at 7 p.m. for a transformative experience under the theme, Activate. Taking the stage are world-renowned leaders and visionaries. Sebastian Bastian, visionary entrepreneur, philanthropist, and CEO of Island Luck and Weiss Technology Group. Barbara Corcoran, legendary real estate mogul, entrepreneur, investor, and star of Shark Tank. Vusi Thembekwayo, global business strategist, venture capitalist, and one of Africa's most influential thought leaders. Be part of this unforgettable evening as the OWN Foundation celebrates a decade of purpose and progress. And together, we activate the future.
Tired of driving around from place to place just to get your car insured and licensed? Frustrated with the process of being back and forth from your insurance company to road traffic? Well, BMG Insurance Agents and Brokers just made insuring and licensing your motor vehicle as easy as 1, 2, 3. Step 1. Visit us at the Road Traffic Department, Section 1, Thomas A. Robinson Sports Stadium. At our office, you can purchase or renew your insurance or get your vehicle inspected. We at BMG Insurance Agents and Brokers represent major carriers. Step 2. See the professionals at Road Traffic to get your vehicle licensed. Step 3. Enjoy your day. Insure with BMG Insurance Agents and Brokers today, saving you time and money. Your one-stop shop for all of your insurance needs. Great rates, convenient, excellent service. For more information, call us at 322-2221.
So you want a space, but not just any space. You need something with a little more potential. So how about 1,000 square feet of room to play with? Superb audio and video production capability, digital LED wall, full lighting grid, and about 124 seats to accommodate a full studio audience with so many other features. Make us your home for your next concert, conference, and so much more. Honestly, the possibilities are endless. Here at ILTV Studios, we'd love to bring your next event to life. So what do you say? Do you want our space?